A voice called out from the back of the studio. Jimmy's laugh froze. Questlove dropped his drumsticks. 300 audience members held their breath. Because Goldie Hawn recognized that voice from the far back corner of the studio, and dropped everything. The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. Studio 6A at Rockefeller Center. Monday night. Another packed audience. Another A-list guest. Another seamless hour of entertainment that would make millions of people laugh before they went to sleep. Goldie Hawn sat in the guest chair across from Jimmy, radiant at 78 years old, telling a hilarious story about her grandchildren. The audience was eating it up. Jimmy was doing his signature moves. The exaggerated laughs, the desk slaps, the perfect timing that had made him America's favorite late-night host. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly what it should be. Until the voice. Goldie. Not loud. Not a shout. Just one word, spoken from somewhere near the studio entrance, cutting through the laughter like a knife through silk. Goldie stopped mid-sentence. Her smile vanished. Her entire body went rigid in the guest chair. The audience noticed immediately. The laughter died. 300 people suddenly uncertain, looking at each other, trying to understand what had changed. Jimmy's grin faltered. Goldie? You okay? She didn't respond. She was turning in her seat, craning her neck toward the back of the studio, toward the standing room section near the entrance where late arrivals and show staff usually gathered. Questlove had been playing a soft jazz riff on the drums. His stick stopped mid-beat. The other members of the Roots looked at each other, confused. Goldie? Jimmy said again, concern replacing his host persona. Goldie stood up. Abruptly. The kind of movement that isn't planned or rehearsed. Her hand went to her mouth. Her eyes were locked on something, someone, at the back of the studio. Jimmy's laugh froze, Questlove dropped his drumsticks, and 300 audience members held their breath because Goldie Hawn recognized that voice from the far back corner of the studio. The cameras scrambled to follow her. The control room erupted into chaos, the director screaming into headsets, producers trying to figure out what was happening, everyone asking the same question. What the hell is going on? Goldie stepped off the raised platform where the guest chair sat. She didn't excuse herself. Didn't explain. She just walked, quickly, purposefully, toward the back of the studio. Jimmy stood behind his desk, one hand raised slightly as if to stop her, but no words came out. In 12 years of hosting The Tonight Show, through countless interviews and unexpected moments and surprise guests, he had never, not once, had someone simply leave mid-interview. The audience parted as Goldie moved through them, creating a path. Some people pulled out their phones. Others just stared. Most were too shocked to do anything but watch. At the back of the studio, in the standing area near the entrance, stood a woman. Late 70s, maybe early 80s. Gray hair pulled back in a simple bun. Wearing jeans and a plain sweater, not the kind of outfit someone wears when they're planning to be on television. She had one hand raised in a small, uncertain wave. Her face was wet with tears. Goldie reached her and stopped. For 3 full seconds, they just stared at each other. The studio was silent except for the hum of equipment and the distant sound of New York traffic outside. Then Goldie said, "Sarah?" Her voice cracked on the name, barely audible but caught perfectly by the boom microphones overhead. The woman nodded. "Hi, Goldie Bear." Goldie collapsed into the woman's arms, sobbing. The audience gasped. That collective intake of breath that happens when 300 people witness something they don't understand but know is profound. Jimmy still stood behind his desk, frozen. He looked at his producers off camera, silently asking what to do. They had no answers. This had never happened before. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened 52 years ago. Goldie Hawn wasn't always Goldie Hawn, Oscar-winning actress and Hollywood icon. In 1972, she was a young dancer trying to make it in New York City, living in a cramped apartment in Hell's Kitchen with 3 other aspiring performers. She was broke. She was exhausted. She was dancing in chorus lines and auditioning for parts that went to other people and wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake leaving California. One winter night, after a particularly brutal audition where she'd been cut in the first round, Goldie sat on a bench in Central Park crying. It was late, probably too late to be sitting alone in the park, but she was too tired and too defeated to care. "You shouldn't be out here alone," a voice said. Goldie looked up. A woman stood nearby, maybe mid-40s, wearing a nurse's uniform under her winter coat. She had kind eyes and a face that had clearly seen its share of hard times. "I'm fine," Goldie said, wiping her face. "No, you're not. Nobody who's fine sits in Central Park at 11 p.m. crying." The woman sat down beside her without asking. "I'm Sarah. I just got off my shift at Roosevelt Hospital. And you are?" "Goldie." "Well, Goldie, whatever happened today, it's not worth freezing to death over." They talked for an hour. About dreams and failure in New York and how expensive everything was and how lonely it felt to be struggling in a city that didn't care if you lived or died. "Where do you live?" Sarah asked finally. "Hell's Kitchen. 47th Street. That's on my way home. Come on. I'll walk with you." Sarah walked Goldie back to her apartment building that night. And somehow, that random act of kindness became a pattern. Sarah worked night shifts at the hospital, Roosevelt, then later at Bellevue. And her route home took her past Goldie's building. She started checking in. Just knocking on the door, making sure Goldie had eaten, asking about auditions, offering the kind of steady, maternal presence that Goldie desperately needed. "You're going to make it," Sarah would say, always with absolute certainty. "I don't know when, but you will. You have something special, Goldie Bear." Goldie Bear. The nickname Sarah gave her because, she said, Goldie had this vulnerability that made people want to protect her, but also this strength underneath that would eventually claw its way out. Sarah became Goldie's New York family. When Goldie couldn't afford groceries, Sarah brought leftovers from the hospital cafeteria. When Goldie got rejected from another audition, Sarah sat with her and let her cry. When Goldie's mother got sick and she couldn't afford a plane ticket home to California, Sarah quietly left an envelope with cash under her door, money she'd saved from extra shifts, money she probably couldn't spare. In 1973, Goldie got her big break. A role in a major production. Suddenly, she was working constantly. The struggling dancer in Hell's Kitchen became a rising star. She tried to stay in touch with Sarah. She really did. She'd call the hospital, leave messages. She'd stop by Sarah's apartment when she was in the city. But Sarah had moved. The landlord said she'd left suddenly, no forwarding address. Goldie called every Roosevelt hospital in Bellevue, but there were dozens of nurses named Sarah and nobody seemed to know which one she was looking for. Life accelerated. Hollywood. Movies. Fame. Marriage. Children. Decades passed. And somewhere in all of it, Goldie lost track of the nurse who had walked her home on winter nights and called her Goldie Bear and promised she would make it. She never forgot Sarah. She'd tell the story sometimes, usually late at night to close friends, about the woman who saved her life without even knowing it. But she'd long ago accepted that Sarah was lost to time and distance and the chaos of life. Until tonight, when a voice from 52 years ago called out her name in Studio 6A. Behind the scenes, Fallon made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. Goldie was still holding Sarah at the back of the studio, both of them crying, 300 strangers bearing witness to a reunion none of them understood. Jimmy made a decision. He walked out from behind his desk, not the performative walking he did for comedy bits, but purposeful, serious movement. He crossed the studio floor to where Goldie and Sarah stood. The cameras followed him. The control room had stopped shouting. Everyone understood, on some instinctive level, that they were witnessing something that transcended entertainment. Jimmy approached carefully, respectfully. "Goldie?" he said quietly. Can you tell us what's happening? Goldie pulled back from Sarah, her face streaked with mascara and tears. She looked at Jimmy, then at the cameras, then at the audience. This is Sarah, she said, her voice shaking. 52 years ago, she was a nurse in New York. And she saved my life. Multiple times. When I was nobody. When I had nothing. She walked me home. She fed me. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Sarah was shaking her head, crying. You were always going to make it, Goldie Bear. I just walked with you until you did. Jimmy's eyes were wet. How are you here? How did you find her? Sarah smiled through tears. I've been watching her for 52 years. Every movie. Every talk show. Every award show. I told my kids that's my Goldie Bear. I knew her when. And when I heard she'd be on your show tonight, I thought maybe I could just see her in person one more time. I'm old now. I wanted to see her one more time. So you came to the show? I stood outside. I didn't have a ticket. I wasn't going to bother anyone. I just wanted to stand outside and know she was close. Sarah's voice broke. But then someone from your show saw me crying and asked if I was okay, and I told them why I was here, and they brought me inside. They said I could stand in the back and watch. I never meant to interrupt anything. I'm so sorry. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. Jimmy turned to look directly at the camera. Folks, we're going to do something we've never done. We're bringing someone into this interview. He gestured to two production assistants. Get a chair. Bring it on stage. Sarah, you're not standing in the back. You're sitting right here with us. The audience erupted in applause. Not polite talk show applause, real, thunderous, cathartic applause. People were standing, crying, cheering. Sarah tried to protest. Oh no, I can't, I'm not dressed for. You're perfect, Jimmy said firmly. You're exactly right. Come on. He took Sarah's arm, Goldie took the other, and together they walked back through the studio, past the audience still on their feet applauding, past the Roots who had started playing a soft, beautiful melody, past all the cameras and lights and equipment that made television happen. They settled Sarah into a chair next to Goldie on the stage. Jimmy sat at his desk, leaned forward on his elbows, and said, Sarah, I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Tell me about meeting Goldie in Central Park. And Sarah did. For 20 minutes of uninterrupted television, she told the story of the struggling dancer she'd found crying on a park bench. The walks home. The envelopes of cash. The nickname. The promises. Goldie held Sarah's hand the entire time, crying quietly, nodding, adding details Sarah had forgotten. When Sarah finished, Jimmy reached into his desk drawer. He pulled out a small notebook. The blue cards he normally wrote his interview questions on. Goldie, he said, I want you to write down Sarah's address. Her phone number. Everything. And I want you to promise me, and promise everyone watching, that you'll never lose touch again. Goldie took the notebook with shaking hands. She wrote carefully, checking with Sarah to make sure she had it right. When she finished, she held the notebook against her chest. I promise, she said. I promise I'll never lose her again. Jimmy stood up. He did something he'd never done in 12 years of hosting. He removed his tie. The signature Tonight Show tie that production assistants carefully selected each night. He handed it to Sarah. This is for you, he said. For being the kind of person who walks strangers home. For being the reason one of the greatest actresses in Hollywood history didn't give up. For showing up tonight even though you thought nobody would notice you. Sarah clutched the tie, sobbing. The audience gave her another standing ovation. Goldie wrapped her arms around the woman who had saved her life 52 years ago. Jimmy addressed the cameras directly, his voice thick with emotion. This is what matters. Not fame. Not success. But the people who walked with you when nobody knew your name. After the show, Goldie took Sarah backstage. They talked for 3 hours. Production staff stayed late, nobody wanting to interrupt. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Today, Sarah lives in a house Goldie bought for her in California. They have dinner every Sunday. Goldie's grandchildren call her Aunt Sarah. The woman who walked a struggling dancer home now walks in Goldie's family forever. And in Goldie's home office, framed beside her Oscar, hangs Jimmy Fallon's tie from that night. A reminder that the people who believed in you when you were nobody deserve everything when you become somebody. The notebook with Sarah's address never left Goldie's purse. Some promises, once made on television, become sacred.